topic is assertiveness. I think we have typically mixed views around assertiveness, and I just want to dig into a conversation around it. And maybe we can expand our view around it too, if we have negative opinions about assertiveness. But before we start digging in, let's just take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen just flooding your lungs and flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing every cell, every organ, bringing vital life force throughout your entire body. And as you exhale, exhale any stress, any tension, any concerns. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And this time, imagine sparkling, brilliant light lighting you up from the inside out, energizing, electrifying, and bringing vital life force into every molecule, every electron, and connecting you with the world beyond. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining stress and roll your shoulders, allow yourselves to move your neck and back about and relax. And now let's just gently press our palms together, softly, softly, softly. Rub your fingers against your palms to feel how delicious that sensation is of tickling and tingling, and allow yourself to really become present to your body right here, right now. Good morning, Tony. Welcome. So glad to have you here, and welcome to everybody else who's joining us. Today, we're going to talk about assertiveness. I had a conversation with a client yesterday about assertiveness, and they had a really, really strong negative reaction to the thought of having to be more assertive, or being called to be more assertive. Welcome, welcome, Andrea. It's so good to have you here, and we're talking about assertiveness. So people often have negative associations to the word assertive or assertiveness, like being manipulative or being bossy or overbearing or aggressive. And I think that when we think of some of the ways that we characterize expression and an expression of opinion, or an expression of a point of view or a stand that we're taking, we often have really negative associations culturally around people who make their voices heard. And it's really interesting to me. I remember that there was a time when it was really popular for women to have assertiveness training, because in our culture, women are typically told to, be quiet, be polite, don't rock the boat, maintain the peace. We have all these phrases that typically relate to women and their cultural, societal behavior. And so I remember where there was a distinction made between aggressiveness and assertiveness, where aggressiveness is more powerful, where or more overbearing, and assertiveness is essentially standing up. And I think culturally, mostly for women, but also for people in general, we're kind of taught to not rock the boat. We're kind of taught to don't make waves, kind of stay invisible. And one of the biggest messages that I have for folks, and that I believe is essential to navigating the very dramatic challenges that we face globally, not just with COVID, but with climate change and pollution, and the state of our ecology and economy and humanity on the planet, we are called to find our purpose, to speak our truth, and to obviously to connect with that truth and to speak that truth in the world and to bring it forth into manifestation. So let's look at what it means to be assertive. Does it mean that you're aggressive? Well, no, not necessarily at all. Because I'll just use some examples. In my coaching practice, I often perceive something in someone else's behavior or phrasing of something or reaction to something. I often perceive something that they don't perceive. And it's kind of my job to do that, right? Like that's why they hired me in the first place, is to be able to recognize things that may be sticking points for them and to assist them in moving beyond those sticking points, right? So there have been times when I have spoken my observations to my clients and they have said, no, that's not there. And it's my responsibility to them not to roll over and agree with them if I don't agree with them, or if I really do see something. It's my job. Good morning, Dido. Welcome, welcome. It's my job and my responsibility to them to assert what I see. And good morning, Irma. So good to have you. Welcome. We're talking about assertiveness and whether it is, how we view it culturally, and maybe the negative associations that we have for the word and the behavior. Perhaps we can reframe it, because we're all called upon to identify, connect with, and speak our truth into the world, to be responsive and receptive, and also to be a stand for what our truth is. So I was talking about, in the context of clients, sometimes I see something that the client doesn't see, or where they disagree with me, and it's my job in that context, really, to be a stand for them, to say, hey, I recognize that you don't see it. I get to try to have them see it. And on occasion, we've just said, well, okay, are you willing to take a flyer here and do a session on this topic, even though you don't see it right now? Is that, so by being assertive, I am being a stand for my client in that context, right? I'm listening to what they're saying. I'm listening and being very discerning and utilizing the skills that I have to be able to recognize things that perhaps they might not see, because we all have blind spots about ourselves. So that's one area where being assertive is serving someone or something. Okay, so I'm sure that we all have places in our lives where we can remain compassionate, remain responsive, remain open, and at the same time assert ourselves, our observations, our truth, our perspective, to be able to be in greater service, right? So, for instance, here's another example, and I'm sure you can find some examples in your life where you were assertive about a position or about something that you believed, and then you achieved a win for yourself and or others. So I have talked to you about my vision for an eco park, and it's this grand vision. And I remember when I first connected to it, when it was really brand new, and I took the bold step of speaking it aloud. I I was in the company of many people, but one of them said, "Oh, you're never going to do that." And I said, "Watch me." And that was assertive. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't offensive. It was, watch me. I am going to do this. I am asserting that I am going to achieve this. And I have moved forward in that direction. And I still have that clear intention and moving in that direction. But that it takes the assertiveness to be able to stand in the face of resistance, when you have clarity about something. Good morning, Christina. Great to have you here. So, where are the places in your life that perhaps you have not been as assertive as you might be in either standing up for your principles or your vision or your your experience of a situation. So, for instance, let's say we're in a family situation where we are being dominated by another person, and we allow and we allow and we allow. What happens when one day we say, okay, enough? First of all, how far do we have to push it till we get to that point where it's enough? Some of us have a greater capacity for suffering than others, and we'll allow ourselves to go down a very deep, dark hole of very deep suffering before we finally say enough. But when we say enough, this is not okay behavior. What we're doing is we're asserting ourselves and standing for ourselves. When I have a client who is looking at the choice of continuing or not continuing in the program, if I see that there is benefit for them to receive, then I'm going to be a stand for them, and I'm going to assert myself with them, even in the face of their objections, to offer them a further possibility. And so it doesn't have to be bullying or aggressive to be assertive in any way, shape, or form. It can be kind, it can be gentle, it can be in service to be assertive. Sometimes it's in service to our own well-being. Sometimes it's in service to another person. Sometimes it's in service to the planet, where we assert that this is important. This requires your attention. And the thing is that when women are assertive, it's often perceived as they're aggressive, or they're the B word, or that they're a bully, or they're overbearing, because they are making their voice heard. And it's so important for us to choose our battles. I'm not saying let's go fighting the world. I'm not talking about fighting. I'm talking about being assertive. And it's an art. It's actually an art to be assertive rather than aggressive. And sometimes being aggressive is an important thing too. And I don't mean being pugilistic. I don't mean fighting or fist fighting, but I mean being a very solid stand for your principles. And yeah, so Christina says, I've gotten so much better at this as I've gotten older. Christina, I have two And I think that the reason for that is that we get to a place of greater self-assurance, or we get to a place of feeling that there's less to lose, where we don't care as much about whether people like us, or we don't care as much about what someone is going to think of us. So if somebody thinks that I'm loud because I'm asserting a point in order to be heard, that's okay. That's okay. If they hear my point, even better. You don't have to be shouting to be heard necessarily at all. So Christina says, still room for improvement though. LOL. Yeah, well, you know what? There's always room for improvement. There's always room for for refinement. Refinement. I think that's such a good word, because fine is such a beautiful word too, and not like that's fine, but meaning that's okay, but that's fine, like that is special and refined, elegant, uh, detailed. um, so there's a refinement, is a honed and cultivated result, I think, something that's refined. Um, so there's always room for refinement. We can be more artful in our expression. We can be more present in our expression. And there are awarenesses. This is a time where it's so important to be able um, to stand for what's right. And what's right for you may not be right for me. What's right for me may not be right for you. And we get to stand for that and to assert our points of view, our positions around those topics. But hopefully, in our assertion, we have the capability and the intention and capacity to remain open and responsive rather than reactive. So Christina says, I also think that historically this is harder for women, as assertiveness is also called something more negative. Exactly. That's what we've been saying, is that women are enculturated, particularly women are enculturated to be quiet, to be silently suffering, to be the shrinking violet, to not rock the boat, to be polite. So it's so interesting to me how we have um, social mores that keep certain um, let's say, so that we have cultural stereotypes that keep people disempowered. And particularly as women, it's so important for us to be speaking up in this time where there is a shifting of paradigm from masculine to feminine to ultimately, hopefully, some kind of balance. But with a masculine dominated culture, to be inserting the feminine, to be championing the rise of feminine characteristics, whether they be in men or women, or anywhere along the spectrum, to be championing compassion, to be championing kindness and the value of emotion, the necessity and beauty of emotional expression. So Irma says assertiveness has been a challenge since it's asking to be honest with myself and to stop trying to please people. to people please too. So this is something that we get trained into. Some cultures more so than others, where we get trained, particularly as women, to deny ourselves. After all, you don't want to rock the boat, and to deny ourselves in order to keep the peace. And so in years and years of denying ourselves, what happens is we forget who we are, and we forget how to hear ourselves. We have to relearn how to uh, speak our own voice, because we have to find it first. And so many of our cultural messages are telling women that they're less important, are telling women that our opinions don't matter, are telling women that it's self-sacrifice, that our duty and role is to husband and family, and that is our priority, and that our lives and our desires and our needs and our wants are our last priority. And so through this cultural conditioning, to first of all find our own voice is a courageous act. To speak it is revolutionary in so many ways. And now's the time for women to raise the volume, to speak into a future that is not one that is I'm just thinking about how the aggressiveness with which we have dealt with each other and the planet, and I'm distinguishing between aggressiveness and assertiveness, that there's been all kinds of aggression. Women typically, not always by any stretch of the imagination, but women typically are more cooperative, are more more life oriented, oriented toward nature, toward connecting with broader forces, are in tune. These are stereotypes, admittedly, because there are many, many men who have embraced their feminine side and many women who have embraced their masculine side. And I think ultimately we're looking for some kind of balance. But the thing is that women have been enculturated to be the lesser sex, so to speak, the lesser voice, the lesser influence. After all, that's a man's job, et cetera, et cetera. And women still don't receive equal pay. Even in the United States, we think we're so progressive or so advanced as a culture. So there are many, many social forces at work to quiet our voices. And I also have to say that I know a number of men who have I'm trying to think of the right words, have come to view their masculinity as a negative, and that's unfortunate. It's really unfortunate, because there are healthy and beautiful, wonderful expressions of masculinity as well. There's a spectrum, right, on whatever traits you want to look at in terms of what's positive and what's not. But I think that we get to cultivate these more traditionally feminine identified traits of compassion and connection and bigger picture, I think, and intuition and emotion. And we recognize more and more through our medicine and our science that emotions that denied, an emotion that is denied shows up physically in our bodies as stress and sometimes other more advanced disease. And so it's so important to assert our awarenesses. Obviously, we want to look at when it's appropriate in terms of like choosing moments um, to assert our beliefs or our position or whatever, and in that assertion still remain receptive. Christina says, I think the younger generations are changing some of those traditional ideas. Christina, I sure hope so. I mean, I've seen that in my family members that I'm close to that are, nephews, for instance, that there are a lot of changes, and I still see hold of some pretty powerful stereotypes. It's going to take probably a couple generations for it to be completely transformed, but I agree with you. I have hope for younger people, but I work with younger people too, and I see them struggling with this notion of assertiveness, and it's not just women. So I think that the younger guys are coming up with ideas about toxic masculinity without recognizing the power of balanced and healthy masculinity too. And so there's this things are getting stirred up, which is a really good thing. And I think we all get to find a balance that is a life affirming balance and a balance of greater strength. It happened to be a male client who was very disrupted by the thought of having to be more assertive. And so I think that it's a challenge for all of us. I think it's something that we are called to rise to recognition of our own voice, and to in moments when called for, to assert that voice, to assert our needs, to take a stand for someone, whether it's ourselves or others, and to take a stand for justice and fairness and all kinds of other wonderful things in the world. We get to stand up, in other words, and that takes it takes thinking of assertiveness not as something where we're manipulating or we are abusing anyone in any particular way, because we can be assertive with love, we can be assertive with understanding, we can express our assertiveness with kindness and care. We don't have to be aggressive, and we can still be heard, and we can still listen. So standing for what you believe in without being combative is, and by saying being combative, I mean setting up resistance, to say, like when I was talking with this person who said, you're never going to do that. And I said, just watch me, like it's going to happen. And I can assert that without having to have a story about them or having to fight with them about it. I don't have to even get into an argument about it. I can just say, oh yeah, I will. I will accomplish this. I do stand for this. I am a stand for you. Even if you don't agree with me right now, this is something I see. And I want, I count on you to know that I'm in your court, for instance, like with a client. And I feel very graced in circumstances with my clients to earn their trust, and knowing that there's a an environment of trust can make it easier, certainly, to assert yourself. When we are in an environment that's a challenging environment, sometimes it's harder to assert ourselves without being aggressive. So Christina says, how can we help the younger generation with this? I think that's a really good question, because I know some young men who have sort of this self hate for their maleness, and that's extreme. That's an extreme expression, but that they have guilt around their maleness, like that they are made guilty just to because they're male. And so I think that nurturing our young men into recognizing their strengths as men, and their strengths as men also embracing their femininity, and this is just stereotypical traits. I think that we get to help them redirect their anger. We get to help to have them be more connected emotionally, so that they can then source their strength as well as I don't want to say weakness, that they can, as well as their sensitivity, that strength and sensitivity are not exclusive, that they don't exclude one another, and that there's strength in being sensitive, that there's strength in being connected. So, good morning, Luz. Well, I don't know how, if I'm saying your name right, so I apologize. I said that before, but welcome, welcome. I'm glad you're here. And we're talking about assertiveness and how this is a time more than any in human history where we're called to stand for possibility, and to make our voices and our visions heard, and to share them with people, to be assertive in expressing the callings of our heart, and our authentic self in the world. Because as we each do this, as we each rise to our wholeness and our fullest expression, our fullest authentic expression, our responsiveness rather than our reactivity, what we will be doing is creating a world that we all want to live in. And so, just for instance, these conversations, we're asserting ourselves. I'm speaking my mind. You're speaking your mind. We're asserting ourselves into the world. We're inserting ourselves into the world. We're being a part of it. And so let's look at what's kept us from speaking up, and let's step into it with open heart and open mind and open will, and step into being willing to express ourselves. The negative connotations that we might have culturally for assertiveness is a way to keep us quiet. It's a way to keep us as sheeple. And we don't need to be sheeple. We can be people, human beings who are helping to shape the future. and the quality of our lives. And we do that by standing up and speaking out for what we believe and who we are from the inside out. So with that, I'm going to call it a day for today. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live each weekday morning on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page. And I invite you to check out the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network's Facebook page. All kinds of folks looking in, speaking about and connecting over spiritual awareness and awakening and more, meditations, all kinds of great stuff. So look at places where you've been a shrinking violet in your life. Look at places where you have desires and hopes that you've not expressed, and look at areas where you might be able to assert yourself with open-hearted generosity and kindness. And so that's it for today. Again, thank you all so much for being with me and joining me in these morning conversations and explorations. It means everything to me. I'm so grateful. And I wish you a wonderful, wonderful day. Lots and lots of love.